My husband's brother told me I had a superiority complex just because I didn't want strangers walking through my driveway at midnight. He, his wife, and his son had been living in my house rent-free for 8 months, ignoring my boundaries, destroying my kitchen, and treating my home like a public hangout. I tried to be the good family member. I tried to help them get back on their feet. But when I finally handed them the eviction notice, I realized that some people don't want help, they want control. Here's how I finally got my house back. My husband's younger brother, Aaron, moved in with us about 8 months ago with his wife, Lila, and her son, who is 14. They didn't end up homeless because of drugs or gambling or anything dramatic. Their landlord sold the property unexpectedly and the new owner wanted everyone out fast. They thought they'd find something quickly, but application fees and deposits ate through their savings. One place fell through after another, and eventually they were rotating between friends' couches and sleeping in their car when nobody could take them anymore. My husband asked me if they could stay with us for a while. He felt responsible because Aaron helped him a lot growing up, and at that point my husband was recovering from surgery and couldn't do much physical work. Aaron said he'd help keep things running, contribute monthly, and that it would only be temporary until they got back on their feet. I agreed because it sounded reasonable. We had the space, and I didn't want to be the person who said no when family clearly needed help. Before they moved in, I made it clear what I expected. Nothing extreme. Clean up after yourselves. Don't change how our house runs. Ask before inviting people over. Contribute what you said you would contribute. Everyone agreed. Aaron even thanked me and said he knew it was a big ask. The first 2 months honestly went fine. Aaron helped with errands and work my husband couldn't do yet. He was up early, out most of the day, and it felt like he was trying to make himself useful. Lila mostly stayed in their room or watched TV in the evenings. Her son kept to himself and played games. It felt crowded but manageable, like everyone understood this was temporary. The shift didn't happen all at once. It was gradual enough that I kept telling myself I was overreacting. Aaron started bringing work-related people around without asking first. At first it was just quick conversations outside, then suddenly people were walking through the garage looking at equipment. I'd come home and see strangers standing near our cars. When I told Aaron I didn't like that, he said I was being overly protective and that he was trying to help bring money in while my husband recovered. I told him that didn't mean our house became part of his work setup. He rolled his eyes and said I was making things harder than they needed to be. Then Lila started ordering things constantly. Not small packages either. Large boxes that would sit in the entryway for days because she wouldn't move them. I'd have to step around them carrying groceries or laundry. When I moved them to the side once, she got irritated and said I shouldn't touch her stuff. After that, she started reorganizing parts of the kitchen without asking. Entire cabinets got rearranged because she said my system was confusing. Suddenly nobody could find anything, and when I changed it back, she told Aaron I was being passive-aggressive. Her son became the biggest source of tension. Not because he was openly destructive, but because he ignored every boundary that existed. He started inviting friends over without asking anyone. They'd be loud late at night, eating food that wasn't theirs, leaving doors unlocked when they left. One morning I walked into the living room and found empty soda cans on the floor, crumbs ground into the couch, and 3 kids asleep with the TV still running. I woke him up and told him that wasn't acceptable. He shrugged and said his mom said it was fine. I went to Lila privately because I didn't want to embarrass him. She immediately got defensive and told me I was being controlling and that teenagers need freedom. I told her freedom doesn't mean treating someone else's house like a hangout spot. She got angry, said I was acting like she was a bad parent, and slammed the door so hard pictures rattled on the wall. After that, every conversation felt loaded. If I asked for dishes to be washed, Aaron would say things like, "We get it, you think we're freeloading." If I mentioned the monthly contribution they'd agreed to, he'd say family shouldn't keep score. Meanwhile, groceries were disappearing faster, utilities went up, and the house constantly felt messy no matter how much I cleaned. The arguments got louder over small things. One night I asked why tools were left outside overnight because it had rained. Aaron snapped that he wasn't my employee. I said I never said he was, but he also wasn't the owner of the house. That turned into shouting, with him accusing me of disrespecting him in front of my husband. I told him respect goes both ways and that I was tired of being talked to like I was the problem every time I asked for basic consideration. About 6 weeks ago, things hit a level I couldn't ignore anymore. I came home and half of our garage was filled with furniture, paint buckets, and equipment that didn't belong to us. Not organized either, just stacked everywhere. I couldn't even get to some of our own things. My husband didn't know anything about it. Aaron said it was temporary and that he was helping a client who needed space for a few days. I told him no, not later, not temporarily, just no. That space wasn't his to offer. He immediately raised his voice, saying he'd been carrying things while my husband couldn't and that this was how I repaid him. I told him helping housing didn't give him the right to make decisions about our property. He started swearing, saying I acted like everything had to go through me. I told him if he wanted authority over a space, he needed to pay for one instead of taking over ours. Lila came out when the yelling started and immediately took his side. She said I'd never wanted them there and that I was looking for reasons to push them out. I told her that wasn't true, but I was done pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. Her son pulled his phone out and started recording, laughing while we argued. I told him to stop. He said, "Why? So you can lie about this later?" That made me lose my temper completely, and I yelled at him to put the phone away and stay out of adult conversations. After that night, the atmosphere in the house completely changed. Nobody spoke normally anymore. Aaron stopped helping with anything but still used the garage like nothing had changed. The money they were supposed to contribute stopped coming entirely. Lila started making comments loud enough for me to hear about how uncomfortable the house felt and how she couldn't wait to leave somewhere less hostile. Arguments started happening almost daily. Raised voices over dishes, over parking, over noise. At one point, Aaron accused me of trying to control his family because I asked his son to stop bringing friends over on school nights. I told him I wasn't controlling anyone. I was enforcing rules in my own house. He called me dramatic. I told him he was acting entitled. The last argument before I told them to leave started over something stupid. A car I didn't recognize was parked in the driveway late at night. I asked who it belonged to. Aaron said it was none of my business. I said it absolutely was my business because it was my driveway. He told me I needed to relax. I told him I was done relaxing while strangers treated our house like public property. That turned into yelling again, both of us talking over each other. He said I had a superiority complex. I told him he'd overstayed his welcome months ago. Lila started shouting from the hallway that I was heartless. I shouted back that I was tired of being disrespected in my own home. That was when I told him they had until the end of the month to move out. No discussion, no extensions. He stared at me like he didn't believe I was serious and asked where they were supposed to go. I told him I didn't know, and at that point I couldn't keep carrying the situation anymore. He said I was throwing family away over control issues. I told him he'd turned a temporary favor into a permanent problem. Since then his mother has been messaging me constantly, saying I humiliated her son and that my husband should have defended him instead of me. Aaron told my husband that I turned him against his own brother. My husband agrees things got out of hand but hates that it's reached this point. Update 1. Aaron stopped speaking to me entirely unless he absolutely had to. Not silent in a calm way either. It was deliberate. If I asked something simple like whether he needed the driveway moved, he'd answer my husband instead of me even if I was the one talking. If I walked into the kitchen, he'd grab his things and leave mid-conversation. Lila started making comments that weren't technically directed at me but were clearly meant for me to hear. Things like saying she felt uncomfortable being watched all the time or that some people needed control over everything to feel important. She'd say it while scrolling on her phone, not even looking at me. Her son started staying out late more often. He'd come in after everyone else was asleep and leave lights on or doors unlocked again. When I said something, he rolled his eyes and said it wasn't a big deal. I told him it was a big deal when it wasn't his house. He said it wouldn't be his problem much longer anyway. That led to another argument because Aaron stepped in and said I didn't need to talk to him like that. I told him I wasn't going to pretend everything was fine just to keep the peace for a few more days. About a week after I told them to leave, one of Aaron's clients showed up in the afternoon asking for him by name. I told the guy Aaron wasn't running jobs from here anymore and that he needed to contact him directly. The guy looked confused and said Aaron told him this was where he was working out of. That was the first time I realized Aaron hadn't actually stopped giving people our address. When Aaron got home that night, he came in already angry. He said I'd made him look unprofessional and that the client might not come back. I told him that wasn't my responsibility and that he knew he wasn't supposed to be using the house for work anymore. He started yelling immediately, saying I was intentionally undermining him because I wanted him gone faster. I yelled back that he'd had weeks to figure something else out and that I wasn't going to lie to strangers to make his life easier. Lila came into the kitchen halfway through and started shouting too, saying I was trying to make them fail so I could justify kicking them out. I told her nobody needed help failing when they ignored every agreement we made. Aaron said I was acting like I owned everything. I said I did own the house, which only made him angrier. My husband tried to step in and calm things down, but Aaron snapped at him and said he changed and that he used to actually stand up for family before before I got involved. That set my husband off for the first time in all of this, and they started arguing too. At that point, everyone was talking over each other and nothing was getting resolved. After that fight, the tension never really dropped. It just sat there all the time. Doors slamming harder than necessary, cabinets shutting loudly, people leaving rooms the second someone else entered. Shared spaces stopped being maintained because nobody wanted to be the one giving in. Dishes would sit longer. Trash would overflow until someone finally snapped and took it out while muttering under their breath. Then social media got dragged into it without me knowing at first. One of my husband's friends messaged him asking if everything was okay because he'd seen posts from Lila about being forced out by people who only cared about appearances. She never used names, but it wasn't subtle. Comments started showing up from people agreeing with her, talking about how some families only help when it benefits them. My husband showed me and I was furious because now people who had nothing to do with this were forming opinions based on half a story. I confronted her about it in the living room. I asked her directly why she was talking about our situation online. She didn't even deny it. She said she was allowed to share her experience and that if it made me look bad, maybe I should think about why. I told her to stop using my house as content for sympathy. She laughed and said nobody cared about my side anyway. That's when voices started raising again. Her son started yelling too, saying we'd made everything stressful and that we were the reason they were fighting all the time. I told him none of this would be happening if basic respect hadn't disappeared months ago. Aaron stepped in and told me to stop talking to his family like I was above them. I told him to stop acting like this was still his space to control. He said I was obsessed with power. I told him he was obsessed with pretending consequences didn't apply to him. At that point we were both yelling, neither of us backing down, and my husband eventually just walked out of the room because it wasn't going anywhere. After that night, Aaron started moving things out slowly, but it felt inconsistent. Some days he'd pack boxes and load the car. Other days nothing moved at all and it felt like he was waiting for us to change our minds. Lila stopped even pretending to be polite. She'd talk on the phone loudly about how uncomfortable it was living somewhere you weren't wanted. I heard her telling someone on WhatsApp that she couldn't wait to be out of a hostile environment. When I told her to stop exaggerating things, she said if I didn't like hearing it, I could leave the room. Sleep got worse for everyone. Every noise at night made it feel like another argument was about to start. My husband and I started double-checking locks because doors kept being left open again. Nobody relaxed anymore. Even normal conversations felt tense because they could flip into an argument without warning. A few days ago, Aaron told my husband privately that if we followed through and made them leave, he wouldn't forgive him. My husband told me afterward, and it just added another layer of pressure because now everything felt like it was about loyalty instead of what was actually happening in the house. Update 2. The last week started with Aaron suddenly acting calm, which honestly made me more uneasy than when he was yelling. He stopped arguing and started acting like nothing was happening. Hold on tight. Before I share the full story, tap that like, subscribe, and let's talk in the comments. Would you have done the same thing? He'd sit in the living room watching TV like normal, leave his tools around, make coffee in the morning like the deadline didn't exist. Lila did the same thing, talking about future plans out loud but not actually packing anything. It felt intentional, like they were waiting for us to back down first. The night before the deadline, I asked Aaron directly what the plan was. He said they were working on it. I told him working on it wasn't an answer anymore. He said moving takes time and that I needed to stop acting like they were criminals being evicted. I told him 8 months was more than enough time to figure something out. His voice got louder immediately, and he said I'd been counting down the days like I wanted this confrontation. I told him I wanted my house back, not another argument. That turned into yelling again. Lila came in and said I was obsessed with control and that nobody could relax around me. I said nobody could relax because every agreement we made had been ignored. Aaron started pacing and said I'd poisoned the situation from the beginning. I told him that was convenient considering things only started falling apart when he stopped respecting boundaries. We were both shouting at that point, and my husband tried to step in, but Aaron told him to stay out of it because he'd already picked a side. The next morning, instead of packing, Aaron had someone come by with a truck. For a moment I thought they were finally moving out, but it turned out he was trying to move more equipment into the garage to organize before leaving. That was when I completely lost my patience. I told the guy unloading the truck to stop and that nothing else was coming into the house. Aaron started yelling that I was humiliating him again. I yelled back that the deadline wasn't optional and that he wasn't expecting expanding into the space he was supposed to be leaving. The argument moved outside because everyone was shouting. Lila accused me of trying to force a scene in front of other people. I told her there wouldn't be a scene if they'd actually followed through on what they agreed to. Her son started yelling too, saying we were kicking them out with nowhere to go and that we didn't care what happened to them. I told him this didn't happen overnight and that months of warnings led to this. Aaron told me to stop talking and said I enjoyed watching them struggle. I told him that was ridiculous and that I was done being blamed for problems they created themselves. At one point Aaron said something about how my husband used to be different before me, and my husband snapped back that he was tired of being put in the middle and that Aaron needed to stop acting like this was everyone else's fault. That shut things down for a minute because it was the first time my husband had raised his voice like that. After that, things moved fast. Not calmly, just fast. Aaron started loading boxes angrily, slamming things into the truck. Lila was crying but also yelling at the same time, saying we'd never hear from them again and that we'd regret how this ended. I told her to stop threatening and just finish packing. She called me cold again. I told her I was tired of being insulted in my own house and that this situation should have ended weeks earlier. There was another argument inside when Aaron realized some of his things wouldn't fit in one trip. He said he needed more time. I told him the agreement was clear and that the rest needed to be gone by the end of the day. He said I was being unreasonable. I said I'd already been more patient than I should have been. Voices got loud again, both of us talking over each other until my husband told everyone to stop because the neighbors were starting to look over. By evening, most of their things were gone. The house felt strange, half empty and quiet in a way it hadn't been for months. The last interaction wasn't dramatic. Aaron just said this wasn't over and that family doesn't forget things like this. I told him I wasn't asking him to forget anything, just to leave. They drove away without saying goodbye to anyone else. The end. Aaron and Lila turned your house into a free warehouse, teen crash pad, and Amazon drop-off zone for 8 goddamn months, ignored every single boundary and agreement, then cried victim when you finally said get the fuck out. You gave more chances than Jesus. They gave you more disrespect than a reality TV family reunion.nta. Not even a little. You didn't evict family. You evicted entitled squatters who happen to be related. Enjoy the peace. Block the guilt trips. Done. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Got a story to share? Drop it in the comments and let us know which one was your favorite.